Hello everyone. Bonjour, hola, konnichiwa, kamusta, ni hao, namaste, salam, zdrasti, merhaba, hoş geldiniz. Welcome to the first session of EPWG IDMS Global Café. Now we are live streaming in Facebook and I want to greet our online audience as well. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Ben Türkiye'den Süheyla Koç. I'm an architect from ICOMOS Turkey, EP representative of Wood Committee and EPWG Focal Point. Today, I will share with my colleague Nitya Iyer. Nitya.
Thank you, Suhaila. Hello, everybody. Namaste, adab, vanakkam. My name is Nitya Iyer, and I'm an emerging professional from ICOMOS India. I am a practicing conservation architect here, and I do a lot of work around conservation and outreach initiatives in 20th century heritage. I'm also part of the ISC 20C. Suhaila, why don't you take it ahead?
Thank you, Nitya. And I want to remind you that this is the first global event that EPWG organized. So I want to thank the people who make it real. Firstly, our EPWG focal point, Jolosojit Lucio, our multilingual communication coordinators, Lo Maik and Nadir Al-Nouri, and our dearest members, Virginia Rush, Hiroki Yamada, and Nitya Iyer, for their amazing effort to put these events together. And our speakers who prepared in very short call and make it possible. And to you, our audience, for joining us today. Thank you. In 18 April, every year, ICOMOS celebrates it as the International Day for Monuments and Sites. This year's theme is Complex Past and Diverse Futures, that we will take you a journey to inclusive narratives. This event consists of 3 sessions. This one, Asia Pacific and Russia. Second one, Africa, Arab states and Europe. Third one, America. In the first one, we have 10 speakers from Asia Pacific and Russia. And we will have 2 rounds of discussion after 5 presentations. And discussions will be interactive, open platform with a respectful and friendly environment, so you can ask your questions and raise your points. And we will end with a summary and conclusion. Now, for the technical announcements, I'm hand over to Nitya.
Thank you, Suhaila. As for the technical announcements, please make sure that you mute your microphones. If not, we would be able to do so on your behalf if we see there's any background disruptions. Secondly, we really encourage you to write down your real name and countries you're coming from so that we can recognize you. If you haven't done this already, you can access this from the participant list. Click on your name and then you can select rename to go ahead and do that. As this is a matter of security, the name will be required. If you're not comfortable to share that with us, we really encourage you to view the same webinar via the Facebook Live that is available at the ICOMOS International Facebook page. We'll also encourage you to provide your comments and questions in the chat box. The discussions, as Suhaila mentioned, will happen in 2 formats, and we will be able to put all your questions together and direct them to the respective speakers. We also really encourage you to come on, turn on your videos and ask the question independently. So we prompt you to do that and you can do that ahead. To lessen the disruption via videos, we also encourage you to switch off your videos if you need to do any other things. We also will actually prompt to the speakers after every 5 minutes so that we are mindful of the time that we have to keep, and also make sure that everyone gets an equal opportunity to share their ideas and views. Also, I really encourage all the speakers, if you would like to introduce yourself in your native language, please do that. Over to you, Suhaila.
Thank you, Nitya. Next slide, please. And I guess it is time for our keynote speaker, ICOMOS International Board Member and a friend and mentor of EPWG, Stacey Wallis. Stacey.
Thanks so much. So hi everyone, bonjour, hola, kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. As mentioned, I'm Stacey Wallis from the ICOMOS board and ICOMOS New Zealand. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces here with us today. And I'd also like to echo a very warm welcome for all those for whom this might be your first ICOMOS event. As we already know, the theme for the International Day for Monuments and Sites 2021 is Complex Pasts and Diverse Futures. So I will not take up much time this morning, as I'm very excited to hand over to our wonderful panels of speakers, each with their unique regional perspectives and insights. So for a brief moment, I will help set the scene with background to the challenging theme that is complex pasts and diverse futures. We only need to look as far as existing public spaces, social and news media to be reminded of past and ongoing global events demonstrating the need for examining current narratives that have prioritized some stories over others, resulting in the erasure of important and relevant perspectives. Such imbalances in the recognition, interpretation, and ultimately the heritage conservation of these sites have persisted. Acknowledging toppled monuments of oppression through to the treatment of indigenous domains in cultural landscapes, ICOMOS is engaging in the promotion of new discourses and nuanced approaches to historical narratives to support inclusive, diverse, and multi-generational dialogue. Addressing contested histories calls for complex conversations and interpretations of the past. So our program will draw from previous and ongoing initiatives that have been undertaken within ICOMOS with a view to strengthening discussions on the journey to diverse futures. Today, we have an invaluable opportunity through the ICOMOS Emerging Professionals Global Café, and we'll kick off with presentations that feature the vast, rich geographic and cultural diversity that is embodied by the regions of Asia Pacific with Russia. Our speakers will highlight the interrelated overarching themes of culture and gender, tangible and intangible traditions, along with the often fraught relationship between the built and unbuilt environments, through a unique, authentic lens on the challenges and the complexities that underpin these sites. Once again, thank you to all our speakers for your willingness to talk about these issues. And thank you to our event organizers, as well as to you, our audience, wherever you might be, for generating this open and inclusive platform for such discussions to take place. Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou. Thank you for being here and listening.
Kia ora, Stacey. Thank you for explaining the background of the story of this theme. And indeed, I guess we can say this Global Cafe event itself as a step towards more diverse and inclusive future. So let's start. Our first speaker is Hiroki Yamada from ICOMOS Japan. Hiroki and our dear speakers, as Nitya highlight, you can introduce yourself in your native language as you wish. Floor is yours, Hiroki.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm Hiroki Yamada, representative of Japan ICOMOS. I'm so happy to have opportunity to share the idea like this. Okay, could you do the next slide? Okay, before this webinar, Japanese EP member discussed on the themes. As a result, we would like to introduce some examples that shows the relationship between the cultural heritage and gender in Japan. Next, I will start. The first example is kabuki. Next slide. More than 400 years ago, kabuki was innovated by a woman called Okuni. Over the years, kabuki has been refined as we watch it today. Kabuki present time is different from original kabuki dance. During Edo period, women were banned from performing in kabuki theater in 1629. Even now, women still not be allowed to perform kabuki. Next slide. We can see a lady with makeup in kabuki theater, but it is performed by male actor. This role is called onnagata. Actor is the required high skill to play this role. It's need to understand the femininity in Edo period very deeply. This role was born as a byproduct of prohibition, but it became important component of kabuki. Next slide. Next example is sumo. Next slide. A huge sumo wrestler called Rikishi crashed in half naked, only with a strong silk loincloth called mawashi. Maybe you can see before. Sumo is considered not only as entertainment business, but also a Shinto ritual. Next. For example, Shiko is a wrestler ceremonial leg rising and stomping performance on the sumo rings called dohyo. It is considered that disperse evil spirit in the ground. The dohyo is treated as a sacred place, and women are prohibited from going up to dohyo even during an award ceremony. However, women could go up to dohyo until modern times. Please next, right? In fact, sumo wrestling was played even among women as same as men. However, the government banned women's sumo in 1897. This is because the new government of Japan considered that it seems barbaric from the view of the development countries of Europe. Next slide. This and so, men's sumo remained with the meaning of Shinto ritual, and women's sumo changed into the sports. And now, in the sports, of course, wrestlers wear shirts and spats under the wamashi. Next slide. Some genders are more religions linked with the sacred place. The World Heritage Site Okinoshima Island is in Munakata City only allowed men to enter. On the other hand, the World Heritage Site Seifa Utaki in Okinawa could only be entered by women. Next slide. Mount Omine, a component of World Heritage Site and a secret place in Key Mountain Range, is still only accepted men. Women can't enter. Next slide. Same to climbing to Mount Fuji was banned to women. In that period, women were only allowed to climb up to the second station because Fuji was considered as a sacred place and to avoid the attract the monk in Mount Fuji. Next slide. In 1872, finally, Mount Fuji was open to everybody. Nowadays, many hikers, both male and female, are climbing Mount Fuji. Next slide. Today, I speak so rapidly because of the limitation time. This gender-based tradition or rule exists in every country, but we shouldn't just look at the present situation and rules. That tradition might be different from original one. Present time we live now is the future of the past. People in past could not imagine the present situation. Therefore, we can say we have more diverse future than we can imagine. I think so. Thank you very much.
ありがとうございます、山田さん。It's quite interesting how you approach to heritage and gender, and I'm sure you will get good question in discussion part. So I'm moving to our next speakers, Cara Garlio from Philippines. Cara, floor is yours.
Good afternoon to everyone, and depending on where the world you are, good morning, good evening, and good day. So my name is Cara, and I'm from the Philippines, from ICOMOS Philippines, and I will be presenting a case study on heritage, interpretation, and microfinance. Next slide, please. So just as a background, I'm a heritage consultant for CARD MRI EHOS Tours, and CARD was founded in 1986 to provide loans to the poorest of the poor so that with financial stability, they could take more control of their lives. CARD is made up of nearly 30 mutually reinforcing institutions, providing financial, educational, and health services, among other things, to more than 7 million clients across the country. Around 2012, I was invited to develop a heritage tour in the town of San Pablo, Laguna. Management wanted to instill a greater sense of history, pride of place, patriotism amongst its clients and staff. Perhaps you're wondering, why would a microfinance institution be interested in heritage? And to be honest, I too was at a loss at that time. I just was so happy to have another paying gig that I took the job. But looking back, what management was actually doing was to climb Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid. Having helped their clients achieve the basic needs of food, shelter, clothing, a sense of security and safety, management now wanted to help their clients discover a sense of belonging, connection, and esteem, all essential prerequisites for self-actualization. And a heritage program was one of the vehicles for this. Next slide, please. So very briefly, we run tours to natural and cultural heritage sites across the country, primarily for CARD clients. And CARD clients are essentially micro entrepreneurs. All suppliers and all guides are CARD clients who normally would not have the opportunity to participate in the delivery of a heritage tour, either because of their educational background or socioeconomic standing. So the narratives we deliver do not focus solely on informing the visitors of a site's cultural significance. Rather, we tell stories that encourage visitors, that encourage connections, for better or for worse, between the site and the participants' own experiences and present realities. Next slide, please. So to give you a concrete example, in the town of San Pablo, we visit a couple of lakes and heritage buildings. Most of the tours in this town focus on the grandeur of heritage houses that were funded primarily by the coconut industry in the 19th and 20th centuries and the lavish lifestyles associated with this. The topic of our tour, however, focuses on social movements of the 19th century and a person's search for and right to comfort and relief from the suffering brought about by the coconut industry during this time. So it's a very different narrative. Our tour is not light. In fact, it challenges our participants to reflect on the roots of inequity and the importance of values for social transformation. We want our tours to be informative and, in a way, transformative as well. Next slide, please. So we've been doing this tour for 9 years now, and due to the COVID pandemic, we have transitioned online, but the objective of encouraging people to use the past to help them in their present and deciding what kind of future they want has remained. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Salamat Cara, and thank you for using your time so efficiently. And it's so amazing how you use local narratives to connect past to the future. Thanks a lot. And now our next speaker is Nazrul Nazri from Malaysia. Nazrul.
Saya Nazrul Nazri. Hello, good day, and a happy World Heritage Day to you all. I'm Nazrul. I'll be representing ICOMOS Malaysia, and I'll be talking about Taman Nagara, a national park in Peninsular Malaysia. This comes together for discussion on its indigenous inhabitants, the Batik Orang Asli tribe. So yes, I hope you enjoy. Next slide, please. Next slide. So I'll start with a brief history of Taman Nagara. It was initially gazetted as the Gunung Tahan Game Reserve in 1925, and was declared as a national park 14 years later in 1939 by British colonial administrators. Following this declaration, the park took on the name King George V National Park. And once Malaysia gained independence, it was renamed Taman Nagara, which simply means national park in our national language. And yeah, I guess we like to keep things simple because that's a pretty uninspiring name. Anyways, it became an ASEAN Heritage Park in 1984. And ever since its submission in 2014, the Taman Nagara has been on the tentative list for the UNESCO World Heritage Site status. Next slide, please. The total area of the national park spans across 3 states, which are called Pahang, Kelantan, and Terengganu. Now, if we're talking about numbers, that's roughly 430,000 hectares or 4,300 square kilometers. So all of that gazetted territory across 3 state borders. The park consists of an ancient tropical rainforest thought to be 130 million years old. On top of all this, it is also home to Peninsular Malaysia's tallest mountain, called Mount Tahan, and it stands at 2,187 meters high. Next slide, please. Next up, I want to give you a small idea of its immense biodiversity. Yes, Taman Nagara is a massive hotspot for biodiversity, which is considered to be at risk and threatened in Malaysia. Its largest habitat, actually. The park is seen as refuge for many of Southeast Asia's larger rare animals, such as the Malayan tiger, our national animal. Furthermore, Taman Nagara is constantly at the forefront of the country's ecotourism and conservation efforts. Next slide, please. Yep, so now let's turn our attention to the indigenous inhabitants of Taman Nagara, who are known as the Orang Asli. They are called the original people or native people in the Malay language, and there are 19 Orang Asli subtribes. But the Batik tribe is the specific tribe that resides in Taman Nagara. I'll be focusing on their culture and their intangible and intangible heritage that they have left behind. Next slide, please. In a nutshell, they live a semi-nomadic lifestyle and they roam around Taman Nagara in small groups. They have a population of 1,400 strong, and their hunter-gatherer culture is deeply linked to their surrounding forest, and they view it as a deity, as a god. So, and then they also identify themselves within their ecological situation, which form their communal memories. So the forest, they create a sense of identity in addition to supporting their livelihoods. Nowadays, they are reduced to a semi-nomadic lifestyle due to government pressure and have permanent homes in allocated areas. However, they still build all these temporary shelters all around the park for forest product collection. Next slide, please. So the blowpipe or the sumpit is the Batik's primary hunting tool. It's made from hollow trunks of young palm and pine leaf, which is dipped in poison as darts. They primarily subsist on gathered fruits, leaves, and fish, and this also contributes to their economy as they attempt to sell whatever they find. They also relocate depending on the season, so they live off fruits during the harvest season, and they also relocate and procure honey during the flowering season, for example. Hunted animals are never seen as prizes, but are regarded as a blessing for the forest and food for the entire community, not just the hunter. So it's through the knowledge of Taman Nagara's forest that led to the development of the national park's tourist trails, and they have assisted in efforts to build this trail system, with some overlapping the Batik trail ones. Next slide, please. So things, next slide, please, yeah. Yeah, so things like sleeping mats, baskets, blowpipes, and fishing rods, these crafted items are made for basic sustenance and are always made from like a forged material such as rattan or bamboo. There's a lot to unpack, but due to timing, I'll talk about the structure. Their traditional forms of housing are constructed along rivers, which are, or within man-made clearings nearby forest products. These encampments are built with a rectangular layout, and they are raised on stilts to facilitate natural ventilation beneath those huts, which is so important in the Malaysian humidity. So these huts are made with passive cooling in mind, and the roofing is woven by a Batik tribeswoman, which is constructed from a traditional leaf thatching. So, and the men are also taught to build these living spaces and tools and how to forge the materials needed from them, from their forefathers. It's just a chain of knowledge which has been passed down. Yes, although temporary, these settlements are the locus of social interaction, especially when you have tribesmen who are gone for potentially days in search of the forest product. So there we have it. That's all from me, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak up. Thank you.
Terima kasih, Nazrul. That's a great example of like how the indigenous people live harmony with nature, and there's a lot of lessons for us to learn for sustainability. Thank you. And now our next speaker is Wang Yi from ICOMOS China.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Hello, colleagues from all over the world. There may be something wrong with my screen, so I may turn it off. Okay, sorry for this. Okay, and I'm Wang Yi from ICOMOS China, and hello, colleagues from all over the world. The case I would like to share today is the West Lake cultural landscape. Next, please. Can you click again? Can you click the last slide, as the image will move?
I guess it is PDF and it won't move. Sorry for that.
Okay, sorry. There may be some. Okay, so forget it. And so I would like to share actually first the panorama of this great cultural lake, which is not only famous in China but also exists influence in the East Asia region. Next. So first, we'll see the history of its nomination. It first appeared on the tentative list as a natural heritage, actually, in 1997. Next. As you can see, next. And then in 2008, it appeared as sort of a mixed site. Next. So first, it appeared together with the Longjing Tea Garden as a cultural site, but its name also appeared in the same document as a natural site. Next. And in 2009, the nomination dossier of West Lake was submitted for the first time, but unfortunately, it was considered incomplete by the World Heritage Center. Next. As you can see, okay, next. And the nomination dossier was supplemented and resubmitted in 2010. And this year, it was formally accepted by the WHC. And it should be noted that the West Lake was the first project in China that was nominated as a cultural landscape at the very beginning. Okay, next. And ICOMOS experts, Professor Park from Korea, came for the site mission, and I had the pleasure to act as her interpreter. Next. And the property was successfully inscribed in 2011. So this year we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the property. Next. And now as the second part, I will use two issues to talk about the story after inscription. Next. So first, as you can see, this is the view shed of the West Lake towards the mountains. There's only one modern building that affects the visual integrity, which is the Shangri-La Hotel. Next. And in the decision by the World Heritage Committee, it suggested local government to consider either lower or demolish this hotel, which is a difficult task. As you can understand, this is a very popular hotel being so close to the lake. Next. But through hard efforts, the local government finally managed to lower this hotel last year. So now when you come to the lake, you will not see any modern building affecting the visual integrity towards the mountains. Next. And the second issue is about the Longting tea plantation. Longting tea is the most famous green tea in China. Next. And the tea plantations densely distributed in the blue area, just very close to the lake. And this part, blue part, was originally included as part of the nomination, but it was considered not very closely relevant to the aesthetic landscape value of West Lake. So it is moved into the buffer zone. Next. But in the ICOMOS evaluation report, it said that consideration could be given to include Longting with other properties in a nomination that reflects aspects of tea culture. Next. And with this in mind, in 2015, ICOMOS initiated a thematic study on the tea landscape of Asia. Next. And this year, China nominated its first tea property, which is the old tea forests of Qingmai Mountain in Yunnan province, which my colleague Yi Mei will talk more about in the next presentation. Next. And this is the image of the Qingmai tea forests. So, and also in the future, we may also think about nominating the Longting tea plantation in a future nomination. Next. So looking at the history of the World Heritage nomination for West Lake, we can see that it's not, the designation is not act as itself, but it also acts as a great bridge between the past and the future, which I think echoes well with this year's theme. Thank you very much.
谢谢你, Wang Yi. And this story of West Lake has a lot of learnings in it for similar sites. And I'm waiting for the discussion part. Thank you. And
Thank you.
The last speaker of the first round is Zhang Yi Mei from China.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Hello?
can.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for this magnificent opportunity. So I'm Yi Mei from China, and today I will be sharing with you a case that we've been working on for several years now. It's the old tea forest of Qingmai, and also thank you, my colleague Wang Yi, for his kind introduction. So I really want to use this case to show that conservation can be a powerful tool for local communities to envision a different future. So next slide, please. So the tea forest of Qingmai is located in the southwest border of China, and it has 1,200 hectares of old tea forest and also 9 traditional villages of Bulang and Dai ethnic peoples. Next slide, please. So the villages actually scattered on the mountain and are surrounded by dense tea forests. Next slide, please. So contrary to the tea plantations that probably most of you are more familiar with, tea forests is called a forest because it used an understory tea cultivation method, which means that tea trees are planted inside the forest. So the tall arbors will be able to provide shade for tea trees, and the biodiversity of the forest will be able to prevent tea trees from getting diseases. So it's really not a very intensive way of cultivation, but a really smart and wise way to cohabit with the natural environment. Next slide, please. So tea has become a really important aspect of local people's life. So they settled in the area in about the 10th century, and they discovered the wild tea trees and developed ways to cultivate tea trees and producing them. And also it's a very important part of their economic source of income and also part of their cuisine as well. Next slide, please. And tea has also become an important part of their religion and lifestyle. Next slide, please. And it's also manifested in their architecture as well, as you can see by the decorations on the roofs and also certain places reserved for drying tea leaves. Next slide, please. So during the early 2000s, there was actually a tendency in the region to expand the terrace tea plantations to improve productivity, because higher productivity at that time was seen as a symbol of quote unquote development and modernization. So as the production grows, the local villagers, they get more money and start to build larger tea factories and guest houses to accommodate tea traders from across the country. So these changes really started to threaten to change the core values and characteristics of the place. So we can see that it's a heritage site at one hand, really vibrant with life and culture, but on the other hand, also vulnerable in the face of pressures of change. Next slide, please. So we started our conservation work in around 2013 and 2014. And what we focused on is really through a process of communication, negotiation, and workshops to work with local communities towards a different future, a sustainable future. Next slide, please. So when we provide local communities with the tools and informations they need, they will be able to make more informed and responsible decisions of what kind of futures they really want. So after they realized the true values of the OT forest, they started to change their vision for the future as well. So a good example is that in recent years, a lot of terraced tea plantations actually started to adopt understory systems to reduce the density of the tea trees and grow more tall arbors in the plantations, because they really see the ecological value of the traditional system. Next slide, please. And also when they started to appreciate their traditional architectural style, a lot of villagers were also willing to modify their modern buildings to make them more compatible with the historic environment. Next slide, please. And also when they started to realize that the resources on the mountain is not inexhaustible, they are also willing to reduce the size, the scale of their tea production facilities so that the future generations will be able to use the resources of the tea forest sustainably. And also you can see the great creativity they've manifested through all those designs of new constructions that are really, really compatible with the environment. Next slide, please. So I think the case of Jinmai really have given us as conservation professionals and also local communities the confidence to say that the key to a sustainable future really lies in the tradition, and cultural heritage will provide us alternatives of a development path towards a sustainable future. Thank you.
Shishane Jangi Mei, and that's really follow through what Bang Yi told, and it's so amazing to see how a tea culture affecting every layer of life, sustainability, and conservation of heritage. Thank you. And this brings out our first discussion round. So if you have a question or any comment, please use raise your hand button. Do you have any questions, comments?
So Leila, we have one question on the chat box.
Okay.
Maybe Tinu Bungaru, if you could come on video and maybe ask your question. If not, I'll be happy to ask it for you.
No, I can ask my question. Thank you very much. It was following the presentation of our colleague Cara, the kind of activity that is that you presented us is something that connects to what we've seen in Belgium to save the neighborhood of big cities, or in Montreal and Canada, Latin America. So somehow it's shared. You even have it in Soweto in different ways. So changing, I mean, the narrative is a nice trendy term, but somehow it's understanding the depth of the story of buildings that you see. And sometimes we tend to focus on the more fashionable and grandiose houses rather than the whole system and justice and economy and bad, very heavy story. But I was wondering how your work has impacted the conservation of these historic houses. Sometimes people may feel very alienated against them, but sometimes they see them as a work of art and recall that they were done by the same people that were the workers. How does that, is there an impact on the safeguard of these buildings from your efforts?
Thank you very much, Dino, for that question and that observation. To be honest, with regards to the conservation of buildings, I would say zero, zero impact, primarily because the buildings that are being visited are not owned by the microfinance institution, and because the clients of these tours are actually not in a position to participate in its conservation. However, these clients are custodians of intangible cultural heritage. So what we're seeing is that CARD is able to leverage intangible knowledge and the products that are being produced by their clients into curating the experience. CARD as an institution has started to get involved in the conservation of built heritage by partnering with some local government offices, but it hasn't yet trickled down to property owners taking an active role in the conservation of their property. I think in the case of the Philippines and in the case of the audience, the participants that we are targeting, it is really about having that discussion. The participants are not those who are particularly exposed to issues of heritage and what heritage is and what value it has to them. So it's really about raising awareness, challenging them to think differently, and to really question what is the role of heritage in a society. So that is what the organization that that I was working for is really trying to do. What is its role, and does it really have a role? Does it have a role in healing societal divides, or is this just a fashionable issue? So that work. Thank you for your. I hope that answered the.
Well, thank you very much for the background, the explanation. But maybe in 15 years down the road, if there's a lot of storytelling and no more building, maybe the story will turn into a legend. So you might want to. What would actually be something that could be done to connect with the future of those buildings, so that they're still part of the experience in the future? Is there something that you can think of?
Oh yeah, I mean that's why we're working with local governments, local government units, and trying to get into these houses by giving them a loan to restore their houses. That was one suggestion that we are exploring, because we are essentially in the business of giving loans. So it's really looking at the business aspect of restoration and how the investment can be recouped, whether in the short or long term. But I must say that some people are a bit risk averse with regards to taking out loans to restore a building. So it would really require government intervention in this case. But we have started talks on that for adaptive reuse.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have similar experience. We're trying to using the Solidarity Fund in Quebec to develop a bit of a model which almost compares to what our colleague Zhang Yimei presented about team and community expertise office. In France, they were discussing recently the idea of a architecte de proximité, sort of a neighborhood architect to support this kind of connection between funding, owners, and heritage. So there's universality in what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinu. Thank you, Cara. And Imei, do you want to add something what Dinu mentioned about this universality and regarding to your case study?
Yeah, so the case of Jingmai is actually, because we've been working on the case for several years now. So it's definitely a very challenging process. There's a lot of a conflict of interest in there, and sometimes you have to make a lot of compromises. And especially in dealing with a living heritage site where people actually live in it, and they have all kinds of need for development, for economic income, things get a little bit complicated at times. So I think what I have learned is that to always focus on the process instead of the outcome, because if you focus on the outcome, sometimes you will be really obsessed with the how it will turn out, how it will look. Does it look traditional or does it look historic? But I think the key really lies in the process of building this relationship with the local community, so they get the knowledge and the tools they can cope with the changes in the future. Because in the end, it's the local community that are the guardians of the heritage site, and not us, the professionals. We're only there to facilitate this process.
Thank you. You really raise an important point, that how we see community in the preservation of our heritage. Do we have any other questions or comments to add?
Yes, I do have a comment and a question to our first speaker, our Japanese colleague. I think his presentation is very interesting. We normally look at material culture, but he talked about people. That is very interesting. I have two questions. They are related. I want to know why there was a segregation between men, female, and male in Japan, and what is the future. So you raised about this issue, and what is concerned is a topic in the society, and what is the thinking, what is the tendency, what will be the future in the near future.
Hi, thank you for question. This is really quite difficult question. Then maybe it is we don't have enough time to explain, but it's just I want to say in the discussion with the colleague, we talk with the other EP members. Then I don't want to say everybody, even the male and female, do same thing, like do sumo and do kabuki, do everyone can get into the secret place. I don't think so, but it's the everybody thinking needed to think about the tradition is not coming from original tradition. So just we should know that the past, then we can talk, because maybe it is not enough time to share our past in this short minutes. So I'm sorry about it. This is a good question. So we would like to talk with the other EP members having time.
Yes, I think, yes, really is a very interesting topic. And thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Richard has a question for Hiroki as well. Richard, can you ask your question?
I'm sorry?
I see you have a question in chat box.
Yeah.
Can you say it?
Yeah, your presentation is really unfolds a lot of issues. I just would like to address how do you see changes taking place in the spirit of authenticity and integrity, looking into the developments as the case may be where you discuss local gender and heritage. Because you pointed out earlier that there were changes already taking place in the latter part. So looking into discussions of authenticity, integrity, are there any thoughts that you would like to share regarding these changes?
Yeah, if the religion matters, it's quite different, but it is kind of consensus the worldwide. So we need to think about who has that heritage, or who owes that heritage. Even we live, for example, in Okinawa, with many immigrants coming from even the from Honshu, it's from Tokyo or Kyushu side to Okinawa, it's a Concord. So their custom is changed. Also, the US came to the Okinawa as well. The custom is changing, but it's still some religion is remains. That the Utaki that I explained, that is the local religion of the Okinawa. So we need to think about the minority who own that heritage. That's the point. It's not only to think about the man and not only the gender things as well. I'm sorry, but it answer well.
Thank you, Hiroki. Maybe we can continue the discussion in the second round because we have another gender presentation there. So for the second round, I'm handovering to Nitya for chair. And Yolo, could you also start sharing again?
Thank you so much, Suleha. So our next speaker who's with us is actually one of my close friends. Her name is Saranya Darshini, and she's from ICOMOS India, and she will be presenting women and water heritage in India. Saranya, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nitya. Hello, Vanakkam and Namaste from India. I'm really happy to talk about this topic because it's really very close to my heart. It's about women and water heritage in India. Next slide, please. Statistics and facts show the need for women to be involved in the process of water management, and it's been happening for years now. What is, however, often missed is the role of women in water from the past. The search for water heritage photo is often seen with a woman carrying a pot of water or walking miles to fetch water. This visualization shows us a gender disparity not only in household water management, but also in water infrastructure. My study reflects on women in water governance, which is not a new phenomenon, but rather an underrepresented layer of history in India. Next, please. In India, subterranean structures known as settlers were built from the 8th to the 19th centuries to collect water. These multi-story structures acted as an essential bond between the past Indian cultures and traditional water harvesting practices. However, little is known about the role of women in the development of this unique architectural model. Women's patronage played an important part in the evolution of settlers, especially in the Western Indian region that has hot and semi-arid climate with variable rainfall. Next, please. Apart from supporting the construction and development of settlers, women also served as an inspiration for the designs derived from the stories of their courage, valor, and love, thereby creating a space where water and women met. This slide shows a mapping of settlers, either patroned or inspired by women in Gujarat. Next, please. History links many stepwells in Gujarat, which is located in the western part of India, with women. Rooted in Indian traditions, these water structures were built as memorial or religious offerings, since act of philanthropy of water service was regarded the highest of them all. For example, some of the best known stepwells in Gujarat, namely the Rani Niwa, which is a World Heritage Site, and Adalaj Niwa, which were built under the patronage of widowed queens to honor their deceased husband. Next, please. The design, language, and ornamentation with these multi-story structures connected femininity and the influence of women patrons. Aesthetically, the stepwell can be considered as a true monument of and to civic life. Next, please. Stepwell iconography allows a glimpse into the lives of ordinary women and their day-to-day lifestyle and their daily routines, as well as rituals that linked women directly to the stepwell. This concept is evident in Rani Niwa, which could also be considered as a museum of sculpture and iconography connected with a water monument. Next, please. Built for water and its services, stepwells reached out and offered a public realm for the daily function of women who were relegated to fetching water for centuries. Stepwells were a dedicated space for women, and their creation went beyond the act of philanthropy by providing a communal space where women segued from the domestic domain to the public sphere while doing the mundane daily chore of just bringing water to their home. Globally, water has been linked with the curative powers of fertility, and this earthly connection is symbolized in the architecture of the stepwell, where water is stored in the depths and inside the womb of the water structure. Next, please. With the advent of piped water and colonialism in India, these stepwells lost their importance and their association with women long forgotten. Next, please. Distinct in their way of storing water, these stepwells had the potential to become knowledge centers for water literacy for its eventual revival. Stepwells from the past could be a model for community-oriented water system and democracy in times of water wars and conflicts, in keeping with modern space and time. Next, please. Considering the SDGs 5 and 6, the carved walls of the stepwells in Gujarat are important pages from the history book reflecting on women and water heritage of India. Coming to the end of this presentation, the question that I present to you is, are we ready to step back into history and recognize efforts made by women in heritage to step in the right direction? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saranya. That was a very refreshing take on stepwells, the use of water, their governance, and the role of speakers, role of women in commissioning such spaces. Our next speaker here is another fellow EP from ICOMOS India, Ekta Chauhan, and she will be talking about moving beyond conflict to creating a community space in Khirki Masjid. Ekta, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Ekta. I'm representing ICOMOS India here. So currently, I'm pursuing my PhD in Heritage Management from Germany. What I'll be talking about is this monument in my native village, which is in Delhi, Khirki village. And the monument that I'll be talking about is Khirki Masjid. Can we go to the first slide, please? So a little background about the monument. The monument, Khirki Masjid, as you can see, is a 14th century Tughlaq mosque. It's located in South Delhi, for those of you who might be aware. It was built during the reign of Firoz Shah Tughlaq by his Prime Minister Janan Shah. The same person is actually accredited with constructing 7 mosques across Delhi. All these 7 mosques share certain architectural features and are considered sort of a precursor to the more developed Mughal architecture, as we call it. So out of these 7 mosques, only a few are surviving, Khirki Masjid being one of them. Now, why is it called Khirki? Khirki actually means windows in Hindustani language, in both Hindi and Urdu. and it's named after its beautiful huge windows that this monument has. So what is unique about this masjid is, as you can also see, it doesn't really look like a mosque, a typical mosque. It was created during a time when Delhi was facing a threat from Mongol invasion. That's why most of the monuments that are constructed during this time has this overall feel of a military monument, even if it's a religious monument like a mosque. Next, please. So what has happened is that there is currently no living memory of this compound being used for prayers. So there is actually no living memory of this being used as a mosque. For the longest, people remember it as a community space. So where it is located right now, the community that I also belong to is a majority Hindu community who do not use mosque for their religious prayers. And as a result, for the longest, they have been using this structure for various purposes. Children used to fly kites. People used to study there. Here, even during the 1947 partition of India and Pakistan, and riots had broken out in Delhi, a lot of people also took refuge. So the current memory of this monument is of community space. However, in the last 20 to 30 years, this has been completely abandoned, even though it is currently under the protection of Archaeological Survey of India, which takes care of all the monuments in the country. There is hardly any tourist footfall in the monument or any facilities such as toilets or lighting or even good cleaning. It's very dirty right now, and that further sort of creates a distance between the monument and the community. What has also happened is that since the place has fallen out of use, there is a growing distance between the monument and the community, where increasingly in the past few years, there are false narratives being peddled for vested interest. A structure that was considered a community asset, a public good. Most of the people did not care if it was a mosque, if it was a temple, or what exactly its origin was, and just used it for their community uses. Are now increasingly concerned about these false narratives and establishing, quote unquote, the real identity of the monument. There have been some unfortunate violent incidents as well in the past. And as a result, the situation is getting grimmer, where the already abandoned monument is sort of further driven to the fringes. Next, please. So this was about the complex past of the monument. It has gone from being a mosque to a community space to an abandoned space. But moving forward, what we can do. So currently, I am working on a series of initiatives to promote its heritage. The idea is that we need to put community at the heart of any initiatives that come for this monument. To start with, of course, there is a need for official support for restoration. There is also a need for community awareness programs so that these false narratives or false news that are doing rounds and further damaging the image of the monument can be addressed. What we are trying to the need of the hour, so to say, is a natural approach, the historic urban landscape approach, where not only the monument needs to be restored as in its physical structure, but also the entire landscape or the entire community that exists in its surrounding needs to be taken account of. Next, please.
30 seconds to
Sorry, yeah, I'm just going to wrap up. These are just some suggestive ways. So I personally lead heritage walks that I started in 2018 as an initiative or as an attempt to bring more tourists to the area, to basically put this monument on the tourist map. There are also some activities for children and youth that were organized a few years back, but then were again stopped. So this is another suggestive ways or avenues that can that one can do to sort of put this monument again back to use. It's a huge space. It's a 80 meters by 80 meters space, which can also be used for cultural events. Eventually, what we're trying to do is to increase tourist footfall that can revive the local business and local economy as well. So I think my time is up, so I would just wrap up here. But if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or leave them in the chat box right now.
Thank you so much, Ekta. It's been wonderful to learn more about this masjid from you, especially how you talk about the layered history of the monument, the current relationship the community really holds with it, and how you are trying to really bridge that and bring about a more community-driven approach to taking care of this heritage space in your city and in your locality. Our next speaker is also a fellow EP from ICOMOS India. Her name is Alisha Anand Acharya, and she will be talking about the monograph When the Eye Clicks, a photo series ensemble. Alisha, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Nitya. A very good morning and a good afternoon to everybody present here. I'm a conservation architect. I represent ICOMOS India here and here to talk on the behalf of India, to talk about the kind of heritage that we have in our country. The project title that you see here, the monograph, which tries to take on heritage in a very different way, to talk about heritage by taking photography as a very powerful tool and how it can impact the whole realm of heritage. Next slide, please. So if you try to look at the map of India, it actually has such a diversity in terms of the kind of culture that it has. It actually has the capacity of being called a continent because of the diversity that it houses. You travel every 10-15 miles and then you have a shift in the kind of culture, the way people speak different languages, the kind of food habits that they have, the clothing that they have, the appearances of different people, and in turn the kind of different architecture that they reflect. So my project, the monograph, will basically try to cut a cross section from north to south and east to west in the Indian subcontinent to talk about the kind of diversity that our country has and explore it through a photographic medium. Next. Yeah, so everybody, whichever state, country, city, continent you belong to, everybody has a reminiscence and a kind of memory of some kind of heritage back there in their city. But they exist as monuments in our country, and we don't know what they do to you. We don't know what they do to us in terms of why are they here. They are here to tell about some story of what happened before you, some kind of narratives of past. They're constantly having a dialogue from the past to the future, but what are they really doing to us? Their use probably becomes abundant over the period of time, but they still continue to speak to us in a certain way that is very artistic. Next slide, please. Hence, the presentation will try to explore photography as an art form. If you know, in the 7 art forms that are widely acclaimed, which are literature, dance, etc., music, which photography is not recognized actually as an art form, because people generally say that, okay, you don't create anything new. So what's so new about photography? And then, how does it actually qualify to become an art form? But the truth is that everybody doesn't see the kind of same thing. The peculiarity that you see in heritage actually gives rise to the kind of photograph that you actually make, and it in turn becomes your photograph. So the project actually tries to encapsulate all of these heritage aspects of may be the culinary legacies, the kind of architectural ingenious that craftsmen had, and a lot of engineering techniques the structures had, and we try to quickly go through a cross section of all of these. Next slide, please. I start from the city where I reside in, Bombay, currently known as Mumbai, which has a huge amount of influence of neo-Gothic Victorian kind of style of architecture. But the one that you see in front of you, a very Baroque, you probably can start moving through the slides, but the Baroque Edwardian kind of architecture that you see in front of you right now, which displays through the dome, which is there. Next slide. The city of Hampi, you probably can go 1 or 2 slides here and there. The city of Hampi, which actually had become kind of rich due to the kind of trade that was happening in the subcontinent in the time of Krishna Deva Raya. The city on the banks of Tungabhadra River was actually getting richer and richer due to the kind of international trade that was happening at that point of time. A few examples in the next slide. Next. We see a huge amount of bazaars kilometer-long markets, huge gateways, huge ornamentations that are there in the city. The image on the top right that you see is of a water well, the step well that you see is an exemplary example of how traditional water management was done in the city of Hampi. So you see excellent techniques of what happens when all of these ancestors from our past actually are trying to build up something which becomes heritage for us today. Next slide. And we see in the next two images, this one and the following one, we see an exemplary example of what really happens when art meets science, because that's what they were trying to do. Even if you look at the kind of bricks that they have, they're not the kind of proportions that we use today. They're more flattish, but the kind of embellishments and carvings that they're trying to achieve are really a kind of ingenious in terms of the craftsmanship. Next slide. The heights that they achieve through architecture. Next. So the kind of heights that they're trying to achieve through their architecture, the kind of carvings and everything was quite exemplary. Next. Yes, you can keep moving through the images. Some images from Delhi Chhatta Bazaar, the play of light is kind of very exemplary. The next slide. Monuments from Goa, the military heritage of Goa, which everybody knows. Portuguese had a huge influence on the military heritage of Goa. You can keep moving through the slides. You see a huge classical Greece example of the Ionic and Doric column that is happening in the column right in front of you. Stop on the slide because you see a very exemplary photograph of Buddha. People associate Maharashtra with temple and fort architecture, but this is the kind of architecture that we have, a sculpting 2000 years old. South Indian courtyards, again a very peculiar feature. Next slide. You see a lot of ritualistic kind of architecture from northeastern India, and again diversity, as I spoke, different people, different clothing. Again, when you have yesterday's history which becomes today's heritage, can today's architecture become tomorrow's heritage? Becomes the kind of huge question in the narrative. Some of the images that
30 seconds to conclude.
Yes, Nitya.
Sorry, I just meant 30 seconds to conclude.
Yeah. I probably will finish in the next 1 minute. Yes, you see a few examples of nature, culture, linkages of heritage, built by the local craftsmen. As we all, you can move through the slides. ICOMOS, IUC, and ICROM, all of them are trying to do the preservation of nature. And towards the end of the presentation, I would take a minute to talk about the Gourmet Gallery, which is a venture that I started along with my sister, which is a food photography studio preserving the intangible cultural heritage through photography as a frozen frame. And we try to do a lot of advocacy by preserving the kind of older kind of cuisines by documentation. The slide that you see in front of you right now, we almost have reached 100-odd documentation of the culinary and cultural legacies that we have. So why record all this heritage, because they form a huge DNA of what our past was. The next and the last slide, which tries to explain about what at your level, what are the kind of heritage initiatives that you can take in terms of the books that you write, the way you theorize it, the way you document, photograph it in a lot of ways. And I think my time is up, so I will stop here. But if you have any questions, or if you want to get back, you can probably get back on the Instagram handle of the Gourmet Gallery, or you can probably write back to me on the email ID which is present here. Lastly, wishing everybody a very happy International World Heritage Day, and thank you ICOMOS EPWG for giving this opportunity to share my views here. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Alicia. It's nice to really, see through your presentation that, an individual's perspective and how they look at any kind of heritage, tangible or intangible, and how they really capture it has a very important role to play in how others perceive heritage. And there is a very strong power that individuals have in being inclusive through the work that they do in their documentation field. Our next speaker is Faryal Sikandar from ICOMOS Pakistan, and she'll be talking about the tangible and intangible story of Murky House. Over to you, Faryal.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Hello, everybody. This is Faryal Sikandar from ICOMOS Pakistan. And in my presentation, I will be talking about a monumental building called Murky House. And the reason I have picked this building is because it is a pre-colonial building, and it was built with a lot of art. The structure is designed in a way that it is a mixture of many different styles, and it was in a way ahead of its times. and it is pre-colonial, so it has it stands very differently from in its context, because it has a very different and international kind of influences on its design. So the story begins with, so next slide. So in 1947, so Mukhi Jethanand was a descendant of Diwan Meval Das, who served the court of the Kaloras in the 1700s. Kaloras ruled the province of Sindh, and his father accumulated a lot of wealth and built this house, spending a large amount of money. That's 20 million rupees at that time. The construction in itself is very expensive, and the craftsmanship used in this house is very at par excellence. And through the records, we do not show that we do not know who the architect was of this house, but it truly is a labor of love, and it was designed in this next slides. You can please move on with the slides while I talk. So this house, next slide. It is designed in the style of reminiscence of Italian Renaissance, and the stone, it has a sandstone exterior and marble flooring. The symmetrical facade is embellished with pilasters, balustrades, ionic columns, keystones on the arches. You can move on with the slides, please. And the mission style curvilinear parapet walls can also be seen. The windows have etchings on it, and wooden lures which would move to let in light and be closed when needed. The balconies have iron grill work on it, which provides depth to the facade. The two-story building, the two-storied house built over a basement, consisted of 2 living rooms, 1 dining room, 11 bedrooms and servant quarters. The kitchen and bathrooms are located at the back side of the building. The building also has a front and back courtyard. The back courtyard has a wooden overhanging with louvers in it, which was used by the women of the house, and it has an accessible terrace with a cupola, which was a very distinctive feature at that time on the skyline of the city. It had very intricate honeycomb pattern mosaic tiles, and ceilings had beautiful frescoes on them. The strong influence of Art Deco in the form of murals, Art Nouveau via stained glass windows, and classical in the form of columns can also be seen in the building. So this building hosted many important public figures, including Jawaharlal Nehru's visit, who was the first Prime Minister of India, and with his immediate family, and Lady Rama Rao. In addition to that, the house entertained many politicians, British, Muslim, and Indian at that time, in the upstairs living room of this beautiful house. So after the partition, the family had to move to India, and by 1957, the remaining family who resided in this house also was made to leave. The abandoned house was later occupied by the revenue and evacuee officers who set up a shop there. So the building went through a lot of many different occupants, and it was unfortunately misused, and at times it was set on fire, and at some point rangers had occupied the house, and basically to save it, but they also misused the building by pulling out the wooden structures in it, and making fire in the winters. So in 2008, the Sindh Antiquities Department took over finally, and with the consent of the family who lives in the US at the moment, gave permission to convert it into a museum. So my point here in this presentation is that my last slide shows that it says that that visitors are not allowed, and conservation work is in progress. So it started in 2008, and it is still closed for public. The city has 2 architectural schools, which and the students do not have access to this magnificent building. And one of the problem with this kind of approach towards these buildings is that the strategy is only limited to converting these buildings into museums only, when while we have many other options of adaptive reuse that can be adopted to sustain the building and generate more revenue. For instance, converting into a boutique hotel, or the placement of this building is very vital in the city, because it is very central to the city, and it can be used in many other different ways, and be used to engage with the community with different activities in it. So the point here is that in our part of the world, if a lot of money is spent on conserving these buildings and monuments, no proper strategy is applied to make use of this treasure that we have. I'll conclude my presentation here, and I'll thank ICOMOS for EPWG to give me this opportunity to present on this forum. If you have any questions, please email me or ask them in the chat here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faryal. Thank you for the lovely presentation. It's really wonderful to see that you're showcasing and talking a lot about underrepresented heritage spaces, their layered history, how it's really important that we conduct research, documentation, and eventually conservation of structure, but also more importantly, make sure that the community is involved at some point in time in the decision-making or possibly even the execution of the projects. Thank you so much for that. And finally, our final speaker for the day, for this session is Anna Gainudinova, and she is from ICOMOS, Russia. She'd be talking about Moscow-Logal Canal. Apologies for the mispronunciation. This difficult past and uncertain future. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. And I'm very, very happy to be here today with you all, especially considering this special occasion. So next slide, please. I would like to very briefly present you a very special, very controversial and exceptionally significant site, the cultural landscape of Moskva-Volga Canal. By squeezing this very broad topic in 5 minutes presentation, I will barely scratch the surface, but I will try to cover principal components of its significance, the context in which it currently resides, and what can be done in future. So next slide, please. The canal was constructed in the 1930s, although the necessity of its creation as a waterway had been quite demanding for generations. And in the 20th century, to transport matter, the issues of water supply of the extremely expanded and actively developing industrial city of Moscow was added. So the construction of the canal successfully solved both issues, and it have been sustaining the key role in the addressing them continuously till present. Next, please. The complex of the canal represents the most significant technological ensemble. It consists of various variety of structures and facilities using hydroelectric power plants that supply electricity to all canal structures and make them self-supporting. Its 128 kilometers length bed is entirely artificial, and along it, water and vessels overcome the hills with height difference more than 35 meters. Next, please. More than 200 different buildings and constructions, including dams, locks, pumping station, housing estates for the employees, administrative buildings, and entertaining and educational facilities, constitute the architectural ensemble of outstanding significance. Each of its components, while corresponding to the others, has its own design and appearance, which was created in conjunction with the surrounding landscape, which in turn, the creation of the canal had significantly modified. The architecture of Moscow Canal is a Soviet version of Art Deco style, and it creates an utopian image of a happy communist society. Yet, it is a significant example of legacy of totalitarianism. Next, please. The whole complex, okay, and next. The whole complex was constructed using mass forced labor and at the cost of incredible efforts and absolutely unreasonable sacrifice from the side of the inmates. During the first period of construction, mechanisms were not used at all, and prisoners had manually removed more than 4 million tons of soil. So many of them had died that even according to official data of the 1930s, every 5 meters of this very long canal bed costed 1 human life. More than a dozen concentration camps and mass graves of the inmates are still persisting along the banks of the canal on their original locations. Next, please. Also, all of still functioning components of the canal complex are exceptionally well preserved, including some of the mechanisms from the 1930s. But none of them, except for 2 objects, the building of the river station and colossal statue of Lenin, are recognized as cultural heritage and are not properly maintained. More than that, lots of them are actually in decay. So next, please. One of the main reasons for this is that there are 2 apparently conflicting claims over interpretation of the past and meaning of the significance of the canal. Next, please. Either it is a monument of the glorious achievement of Soviet regime, which only a decade later won a victory in the Second World War. By the way, this event is apparently extremely popular among contemporary Russian political elites. Or the canal is a testament and place of remembrance of the 1,000 nameless victims of the very same Soviet regime. And one, of course, could not exist without the other. So on that ground, the whole complex is unfortunately denied cultural and historical significance. Next, please. But thanks to activists and initiative group of heritage practitioners, action are being taken to change the situation around this outstanding associative cultural landscape. We all work very, very hard to preserve what could be preserved, and reasonable efforts are taken to raise awareness and attract attention of both local community and more broad civic community to this site. A very important episode was a publication of the case study of the Moskva-Volga Canal in the Google Art and Culture project as a hidden heritage under threat, and as an illustration of the issue of conflicting interpretation while discussing the matters of authenticity conservation. Next, please. So we hope that by enlisting the support of national and international community of heritage practitioners and heritage admirers, we will succeed in preservation of this exceptionally interesting cultural landscape and all layers of its significance. That's pretty much it. So thank you very much for the attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was a wonderful presentation. And you really, through your presentation, highlight that most heritage spaces have a layered history, and there's a need to be more inclusive in the way we interpret them and the way we explore and express them in different forms and in different platforms, really. We will now open our second discussion round, and I'd request all the speakers to maybe switch on your cameras and be available for the audience to ask you questions. I'll also request the audience, whoever would like to ask questions, to please raise your hand. We'll call out your name and you can ask your questions. And before you do so, I'd request to also introduce yourself and the country you're coming from. So the floor is open. Can we have somebody who would like to first go with the first question?
Nitya, I'll go with the first question because I have put it on the chat box. Hi, Faryal. That was a lovely presentation that you did. My question was regarding the flooring because it's quite similar. I mean, it's a colonial, if I'm not wrong, it's mintal tile, right? Yes, so because that's very commonly, I mean, every site that I come across in India, we do have these minton tiles. So I just wanted to know about that and how, what is like the conservation practice or how is that dealt with there? You're muted. You're muted.
The tiles are Milton tiles, and these are used in the entire building. There's use of marble in the outside courtyard, and the interior rooms have these tiles, and all rooms have different patterns. And the courtyard has those honeycombed pattern tiles. So it's a mix of different styles. It's very unique in a way. Yeah, and the practice you're talking about is that we have a department in the Sindh government called Sindh Antiquities Department that basically invests money and hires architects. There's a whole department that looks into this, and they document these buildings and restore them. I feel that there's a lot of room for improvement there because we don't have a lot of heritage conservation architects in the country. There's a very small number of practicing at the moment. So government institutes and government departments need to hire these people and consult them. I've seen that mostly the archaeology department is consulted regarding these buildings, but I think specialized people in the field need to take up these projects, and the results may change drastically. Yeah.
Thanks, Faryal. Because in India, we have the same tiles, and now there is this, setup of having these tiles being recreated because obviously it came from England for all the colonial buildings. But yes, definitely do something for you to check out as case study. Thank you.
We also have many companies producing these tiles, but with different methods. Yeah. They look the same, but obviously the designing and the methods are different. But yeah, we do have these here in Pakistan as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faryal. You have another question, and can I call Nanki Kaur to please come up and ask your question? If not, I can do it on your behalf. Okay, I'll do it on her behalf. So Nanki actually asks, what kind of museum is going to be set up at Murky House?
So the Murky House has all its furniture in place, and the original is not there, of course, but there are certain pieces that are used there in that period of time. And there's a space designed or allocated for a video that the visitors come and see about the history of the building. But I don't see a lot happening there. I don't see a very substantial plan over there that will actually sustain the building. We have spent a lot of money on restoring it. We have used all our resources and everything, but I don't see a post conservation plan there. How will we sustain this? How will this building live on? We've restored it completely, that's fine, but what now? So it still remains a very confusing question for me as well, because I've been visiting this for many years, and even during the process of conservation, friends visit the city and they call me, take us to Murky House. It's always closed. So this is a problem with these monuments. And I think another thing that needs to be done is that the city of Hyderabad should have a tourist plan where these important monuments be put into that, so that we have a plan that actually supports all this, because restoring a building in isolation is not going to help as such. So that's, I think, is needed.
Right. Thank you so much. And I think a lot of what you spoke about in terms of engaging community might also be a great way to sort of enable and get what you're recommending going forward. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
On that note, on the note of community, there's another question that I'd like to sort of put it out there for our colleagues from China, Philippines, and India as well. I mean, actually, it's open for all of you, really. It is to talk about how has engaging with the community enabled you to do your work? Has that led you to think about inclusivity and diversity in any other way? What has been your personal experience, and how has that shaped your practice moving forward? Can I maybe request Anna, if you could take the first go at it?
I'm sorry, Natia. Yeah, my connection is not very good. Could you please repeat the question?
Sure. For sure. What I meant to ask is, how has engaging with the community enabled you to conduct the work you're currently doing, the one you presented or any other? And when thinking about these projects, what comes up, in terms of inclusivity and diversity, and how has that sort of influenced your practice and the way you approach issues or problems or challenges associated with different sites?
Well, thank you. I'll probably stop my video just to be sure that you can hear me. Okay. Well, the interaction with community is one of the most crucial part of the project, because as I said, lots of parts of this fascinated site are in decay and not maintained properly. So local community plays a crucial role in maintaining, in preservation, and also in discovering of these undesired or difficult parts of history of the canal, because actually, only the local community and activists are responsible for commemoration of memory of the victims. So yes, and actually later today, we will have a huge event. We invite all the locals and some experts to meet and to discuss the future prospects of the site and how to achieve our goal and make it recognized heritage. So that's, I hope I answered your question. Yes, so it's very important, local community.
Yes, definitely, Anna. Thank you so much. Ekta, can I maybe request you to add in a little bit more about your experience, considering you're trying to do a lot about it in terms of community engagement? I think Ekta is not here. Maybe Saranya, if you can jump in and talk a little bit more about, just exploring the whole narrative of gender and heritage, because it's very interesting, and in many ways it ties in and draws parallel with what Hiroki actually spoke about as well in his presentation.
Yeah, because water is such a common thing that, and there are so many policies, government, and I think worldwide, we all are working on water conservation. And it's basically the most essential part for human life, right? But in today's time, with easy access of water, just a tap away, it has become, sort of very crucial to understand the ecology and water environment, especially the communities who actually work with, water, where women, as I had mentioned, there are statistics upon statistics where women are the main lead, if I may say, or the main protagonist in this whole water story. They are using water, they are walking miles and miles. These photographs are everywhere when you even just Google water heritage. But then when these policies are made, what is the reflection on women? What are they talking about in that sense? And that is where, the history of women, what I want to, I've been working on this and bringing this whole narrative into picture is because women, especially, they feel it's a common thing, it's a daily thing. So what is different? But throughout history, we have seen women have been a very strong, they played a very vital role in water governance. So it's very important right now to bring back that narrative, to bring this discussion across forum. I mean, I'm talking today, but it will, even if it's like 10%, if it reaches out to someone, they will be going and talking back in their country, and they will be exploring their history. And this is going to be something that should be a very commonplace discussion where water, women, and gender should be discussed upon, and they should be the main part of policy driven initiatives that are happening around the world. And also because in water and heritage we have seen quite a lot of engineering scholarships that has happened, but the human touch is kind of lost. So that is what I'm trying to bring back by talking to women and what they feel about from this daily chore that they do of just water, bringing back even for irrigation or even to their household. Thanks, Satya.
Thank you so much, Arnya. Can I now call upon Sugela? If you please come up.
Thank you, Nitya. Thank you, everyone. That was an amazing presentation and an amazing discussion. Before I conclude, I request from our participants to open their camera and we can have a photo shoot for a memory of this great event. And in the meantime, I can make our conclusion. And as you see, we reach out from east to west of Asia Pacific region, and we touch the inclusivity in narratives and in sustainability, and most of them, the community involvement. And this is just a step, and we are hundreds of people in Zoom and Facebook, and we are talking about our complex past. And I believe this mindset in respectful, open, and inclusive dialogue will bring us to diverse future. Thank you so much. And I want to remind you, we have two more sessions, many more amazing stories, and it will start, I guess, after 10 minutes. But now we will leave and end this meeting, and we will meet you in the second one. Thank you for joining us today. Teşekkürler, arigato, धन्यवाद.